Hi everyone, this is candidate Master Isaac Steincamp from the Chess Summit Network, and for today's video, I'm coming out with Chess Chat 3, and to honor one of my coach's requests, which was to not study chess this week, I'm doing a free game analysis of a game that was submitted to me a couple of weeks ago by a couple of lower-rated players, but for the most part, I wanted to talk about my goals for the US Junior Open, which is coming up in 3 weeks, and the future for ChessSummit.com, which is coming up sooner than I can imagine. So, for those of you guys who just read my blog, I just came out with a post making the most out of an average tournament where I scored 3 out of 7 at the Cherry Blossom Classic. I lost a few rating points, but I thought on a whole I played reasonably well. I look back to New York, which was a great experience for me, winning my first ever adult tournament at the Marshall Chess Club. And I felt like there was a lot of luck moving in my way. So, for example, in the last round, I needed a result to go my way to have an opportunity to play for first. Sometimes these things don't happen. And, it did. And my opponent at that point decided he also wanted to win the tournament and went for some sort of crazy counterplay that just didn't work in the position. I just got the better of him. And also in that tournament, my round 3 game, if my opponent were maybe a little bit stronger, maybe he would have found the right way to draw that game. But he was a very strong player. In fact, he was the K3 national champion. And, these kind of lapses happen. It was just fortunate that it happened to me at that time in the tournament so I could have an attitude change about how I need to address the future rounds. So I really thought that really propelled me going into this tournament and gave me a lot of confidence. This past weekend, I didn't have as much luck. Granted, I got my best ever win against a 2355 rated player. But after that, I got sprung with a lot of opening novelties. We reached a lot of dry positions where my opponents didn't give me any chances at all. And for a positional player, that can be kind of difficult. And in fact, in round 4, I actually played completely tactically, and I almost got a result. But unfortunately, I misplayed it. And a sacrifice is a sacrifice, and when you can't justify, you're done. So, these things happen. I wasn't as lucky as I was back in New York, but I think that in terms of chess that I actually played over the board, I actually was able to address a lot of the problems that I thought I had leaving New York. And if I repeated any of those problems, it was to a smaller scale, and I have a better idea of what I need to work on now over the next 3 weeks. So I really think that this tournament was a step in the right direction, regardless of how my rating behaved. And I'm really looking forward to seeing how I can apply what I've learned over the past 2 weeks in the Charlotte tournament this coming weekend, starting tomorrow night, the Carolinas Classic, which I understand is the first time they're running the tournament. It's a G110 30-second increment time control, which I'm really happy to see because that's very similar to the US Junior Open. US Junior Open time control is G90 plus 30-second increment. So I get an extra 20 minutes compared to that. But I really felt like both in New York and this past weekend in Washington, D.C., there were moments where I was really pushing my opponent on time control, but they were bailed out because I hit move 40, and then after that time wasn't a factor. That won't be the case here in Charlotte. And that also won't be the case in New Orleans. So I'm really interested to see if my effective time management skills so far continue to give me an advantage, both in Charlotte and, at the US Junior Open in New Orleans. So I'm really excited about that possibility. I just looked at the registration for the US Junior Open. Right now I'm the 4th-seeded player, but because it's 3 weeks before the tournament, and I'm sure a lot of players that are, either live locally or live farther away and need to book flights, they have yet to register. So I'm not really too worried about, where I'm seated going in, but, I'd like to think that with the preparation that I'm doing, if the chance comes up to claim the US Junior Open by, a strong finish, I'd like to think that I'm in the position to go do that. Then again, if I have a tournament like this past weekend where my opponents play really strong games and they don't really give me anything, well, if I play my best, I play my best. And, that's all I'm hoping for at this point. So, that's that. And I'm really excited about, what this means for my chess career. Here on ChessSummit.com, I've been able, since I was about 1900, to post my goals about breaking 2000, going to the US Junior Open, at some point breaking National Master, and I've really been able to document that here on the website, and I really think that the support that I've gotten, both through Chess Summit and GoFundMe, has really helped propel me to become a stronger player, and I can't thank all of you guys enough for what that's meant for my chess career. So, as I mentioned in my last post, when I was discussing my round 6 game with my friend Balin Lee from Carnegie Mellon, I will be adding him as an author after the US Junior Open, as well as 2 other authors. We're still looking for a 4th author, but our 3rd author will be Vishal Kobla, who's a very strong high school player from the Northern Virginia area. He'll be a sophomore next year. And he's also about my rating. He's about 2130, 2120. So we're all really looking forward to bringing what we know about chess to chesssummit.com and continuing to make it a free chess medium to discuss all of our goals of breaking 2200 and beyond, as well as introducing a couple guest authors to the site. I don't want to drop any names yet, but as of right now, we have a commitment from a Grandmaster and an International Master to post on our first 2 weeks, and we're really excited. This is a really exciting time for chesssummit.com, and we're really hoping that, by discussing our goals and sharing what we're learning in the moment, we can give our experience to you for free through chesssummit.com in a way that's never really been done through the online chess community before. So I'm really excited about what this means for chesssummit.com, as are the other authors that I've discussed the ideas to so far. And I hope that you guys continue to follow chesssummit.com after the US Junior Open. I'm sure that there'll be a lot of exciting goals that will be accomplished through chesssummit.com like they already have been over the past 2 years. And I'm really excited, and I think that this is an exciting time for everybody. So that being said, I had a game that was submitted to me a couple weeks, if not months ago, from a player from Virginia Beach who I would guess is probably about low 1000s or maybe on the cusp of breaking 1000. And I wanted to share that game today because I thought that there were a lot of, opening fundamentals that needed to be addressed, as well as perhaps some tactical miscues. So I just wanted to discuss, these ideas with this game. And I hope that you guys can, get the most out of this free game analysis and continue to send your games over at chess.summit@gmail.com. I can't promise to get to every game, but if you have an interesting game you'd like me to go over on the site, I'll do that. This is my first time doing it over video through Chess Chat, but I've done a lot through posts, and I think that everybody who sent me a game so far has gotten a lot out of their posts. I've done a lot of posts for players back at my high school at the Maggie Walker Governor's School. There's a lot of players there trying to break 1700 right now, as well as for some other players who live in the Virginia Beach area. And I would encourage everybody, regardless of geographical region, to send in their games. All right, so let's go ahead and start. The player who submitted the game to me was playing white, and we quickly reached a philidor. And, looking at white's position, I'm not a theoretician, although I did play e4 in round 6. If you haven't checked that out, please do so. But I think white has a lot of choices in the philidor, whereas black is kind of limited. So, for example, black can't really take on d4 because then white gets a nice bind position, and it's hard to really play for the center with your pawn structure. So, for example, if black were to ever play c5, well, then d6 becomes a really weak pawn. So this is definitely a pleasant position for white. And so white is the one with choices, I think. White can decide to take on e5 and go to this endgame after queen takes d8, which should be about an even, but I think for anybody who's under 2000, if you really study this endgame and you really learn how to play it, having the advantage to castle might be enough at that point to really, maybe convert something, getting a rook into the game quickly. Black should probably play a move like after takes e5, c6, and then bring the king from d8 to c7. But okay, this is a lesson for another time. So I don't really like the move that black played, which was this move f6. And f6, okay, it addresses the immediate problem of the need to protect this pawn on e5, but it doesn't address the rest of the opening fundamentals. I think black is already a little bit behind in development just because of this f8 bishop being blocked in by the d6 pawn. Of course, this is a natural theme of the philidor, and the idea is to play like g7, g6, and bishop to g7. But again, not being a major theoretician, I'm just going to go with fundamental moves that I would look at if I were having this position for the first time. Okay, knight to c6 looks totally fine to me. I mean, it's kind of scary to see black play this move d5, but we play knight e7, and now we're ready to play moves like bishop to g4, f5, g6, bishop g7, knight f6. It just seems like the position really flows together, and when you're trying to come up with an opening setup, you also kind of want to think about, do the pieces work together as a whole and as a unit, or are they just kind of like interspersed and they don't really have a coordinating function? This is something that you want to think about when putting your pieces on their respective squares. I guess another thought could be to maybe play bishop to g4, although I don't like it as much as knight to c6. The idea being that we reach this position and we'll get like an interesting middle game, but I kind of already like white just because white already has the bishop pair and can immediately start creating threats. I mean, this is a basic scholar's made idea, but there's nothing wrong with it just because f7 is a target. Knight h6 is obviously met with bishop takes h6, and, do we really want to put our queen on d7 when white's just going to castle and play rook d1? I don't think so. So I think that there were a lot of other options for black to consider. I mean, I think black has to kind of develop quickly because of this, this poorly placed bishop on f8. So, I mean, he really needed to come up with something. f6 is different, but I'm not exactly going to put it in the creative category. Okay, so white in a position where he was faced with a lot of options because black didn't exactly address any issues, I think he played a reasonable move, which was knight to c3. Simply just developing a piece, bringing it towards the center. And one of the things I like to tell a lot of my sub 1400 students is that it's not important to know theory. What's important to know is the opening fundamentals that are created in no theory. If you really think about it, regardless of the development of chess engines, opening theory has been around for a very long time. And the whole point of opening theory is it's kind of like a cheat code to kind of help you, use the fundamentals to your advantage. Either by controlling the center, developing quickly, getting your king safe, and then finding the right ways to have a middle game plan that's effective to best kind of uproot your opponent's position. That's what opening theory really is. It's just a cheat code to help us get there. If you look back to players like Petrosian and Capablanca and Alekhine, they were all figuring this out intuitively. And, that's a lot of what chess is about. And in these kinds of positions, if you ask yourself the questions that are important to opening theory, you might not be right all of the time, but if you're asking the right questions and you're thinking in the right way, you're going to be right most of the time. So here, knight to c3 is a perfectly great move because it's not quite clear where we want to put our bishops yet because black hasn't really done anything with his bishops. I think another option that might have been interesting is bishop to c4. The idea being that this bishop either belongs in e6 or g4, so playing bishop to c4 would force him to find another way to get this bishop to e6. And I think another good option would be this move h3. The idea being that this bishop, again, e6 or g4 are the only two real squares right now. By playing h3, we take away this g4 square. So I think all of these were great options. I like white's move here, knight to c3, nothing wrong with it. And here black plays c6, which I'm kind of at a loss to, understand here because black is blocking in his own development, and it's not quite clear how he's getting his pieces into the game. Right now, I just see one piece that can't get to its natural square, two pieces that can't get to its natural square, and now three pieces, because if black plays g6, these d6 and f6 pawns become very awkward very quickly. And so the only good piece that black has in this position is this bishop on c8, which can go to either e6 or g4. So I'm not too crazy about, these moves. So again, the ball's in white's court. How do you want to take advantage of, your opponent's move? I really think that, what white played d4, d5 is a great option, but other options to consider, I think, again, would be h3. And, when I reach a position like this, I just think about how do I restrict my opponent's position? Fundamentally, you have to understand that you've done all the right things, black has done all the wrong things. Let the mistakes come to you because black is going to run out of options. So playing d5 is a good move, but it kind of forces the issue. Playing h3, kind of says to black, okay, you made your moves, but now we're just gonna play this wait and see game to kind of see what you do. d5 isn't really an option because an e5 would be really weak, so we could take, and then take. Black center is going to get busted. How is he going to develop his pieces? Make him commit his pieces to certain squares, and then maybe consider playing a move like d5. Again, I really think that black does not have the luxury of being able to take on d4, just because we already have a bind position and this d6 pawn is very weak. As long as black can't play this move d5, we should be good to go. And even though here, tactically, he could play d5, he'll end up with an isolated queen's pawn and very terrible development. So bishop b5 check, castles for e1 are all great options. So if we just put this on the board, and okay, let's say for argument's sake he plays like knight d7, we're already castling, we're getting an initiative. Granted, black should develop the bishop here, but at which point we don't even trade, we just play bishop back to d3, and we're doing great. Already we have this idea of queen to h5, so like if knight d6, this is a very big threat because we have bishop takes g6, and we're attacking a lot of things. And so, you want to always think about ways to kind of force black to make the bad decisions, and don't make yourself go out on a limb hoping that he does that for you. But a couple things I do like about d5 is it's asking for a structural change. So black is already kind of in an awkward position as long as white doesn't take on c6, allowing him to develop his knight. So for example, if we reach a line where black takes on d5, we can just put our knight on d5, and let's say, okay, knight to c6. We can think about a move like c4 to create a bind-like position, but the point is we already have this backwards pawn on d6. We have the target that we need. Bishop to e3 should be sufficient, as well as bishop to b5. I really like white's position. Another thought here is that if black plays this move c5, we kind of have like this backwards stone wall. In terms of like a flipped structure, instead of c6, d5, e6, f5, we have it flipped. But it doesn't matter because white has the pawn structure that he wants anyways. If you're playing a Dutch stonewall and your opponent has pawns on e5 and d4, you're almost ready to resign because you haven't succeeded in getting the position that you wanted. So I like that This does ask black to kind of choose a structure. As long as white doesn't take on c6, we're good to go. All right, so black played knight to e7, but this doesn't really do anything because, okay, if we give white a nothing move really quick, like h3, again, restricting this bishop's mobility, we can take, and if we reach this position, already I think white has a strong initiative. We're considering, taking on c6. I preferably, I don't think the pawn's worth it because black will become active. I think simply castling and playing a move like rook to e1 will be a great way of achieving what we need in this position. So that being said, I don't really think black has any threats in this position. So white just played bishop to c4, which I think is perfectly fine. In fact, now I think maybe has a specific tactical idea, is that if black takes and we reach this line, this is actually much worse for black because there's already the immediate threat of mate on f7, and black will have to play a move like queen to e7 or queen to c7 to defend mate, and again, not develop his pieces. So, nothing objectively wrong with white's play so far. Other good moves here I think are bishop e3, bishop e2, h3. I think these are all interesting moves, but bishop to c4 isn't, I think, tactically justified, not to mention white's also getting ready to castle. So I like what white's doing so far. So black played knight to g6. And, I wrote an article called The Tale of Two Bad Knight B6s, which is where this knight on b8 went to d7 to b6. And, I had games submitted from multiple players, from different states actually, where this was a theme. And in both cases, the player playing white actually had an opportunity to press for the advantage and, probably go on to strategically win the game. But both players mishandled it. So I discussed ways to kind of eliminate the mobility of the b6 knight. This holds true in the opposite side of the board with the knight on g6. And I kind of like how white handled this position, h4. This was kind of like one of the ways that I addressed how to, handle this knight. But if you really wanted to be creative, I think a cool way to do this might be to insert this move g3. The idea being that black is so far behind in development, this isn't really a target. You're taking away the f4 square, and you're just further cramping black. The idea behind h4, I think, is in the right spirit, but even if black plays knight f4 and we damage his structure, he succeeded in the sense that he's less cramped and has traded pieces. When you're cramping your opponent, you want them to have more pieces so they kind of stumble on top of each other. In this case, that just isn't what's going on in the position. So I think g3 is an interesting move. I don't think black would anticipate h5 at this level. Perhaps would play bishop to g4. And this is why I was perhaps hesitant to play bishop c4 immediately, because I think the bishop would have belonged here. But already, we can still play h4. This trade, actually, black's gotten rid of his best piece. We're playing h5. He's going back to e7. And we can just see how much time black has wasted trying to develop his pieces. So this is a very interesting prio, which is kind of like a Russian word for kind of like an idea in a certain set position. And I think is worthy of consideration, maybe not necessarily the best move, but definitely something to look at. But I like h4. To me, it communicates that white is actively trying to do something about black's, relative passivity. So black played b5, and this is an interesting way of being active. It gives this bishop another square to go to. But again, we're making another pawn move with black, and if we look at black's pawn structure versus white's pawn structure, I think white's pawn structure is still much better. In fact, now we've given ourselves the option as white to take on c6 because there's no b takes c6, so it will be a lot harder to have this d5 break. So, okay, white retreated to b3. And I think here, this is kind of taking a little bit too much stake into having, this mating idea. I think that white was really thinking black would release attention and he would get this sort of play, which would be great. But we always have to assume our opponent would make the best move. And I'm already kind of curious what white would do if he was presented with this move c5. I know it's another pawn move, but we have an immediate threat, which is this move c4. And if we play a move like a3, well, c4, and we have a bad bishop forever. And, okay, if we try to be a little bit more active about the situation with a4, we have some complications after a move like b4. Black is gaining a lot of space. He's still worse, but he's gaining a lot of space, and I think this is something that needs to be considered. So this is why I'd like to suggest this move bishop to e2. And I think that tactically, this is actually a lot stronger than bishop to b3, because not only are we threatening to take on c6, so let's make a nothing move for black. I don't know, like bishop e7. Not only are we threatening to take on c6 and making this a backwards pawn, we have the added benefit that we're actually attacking, the b5 pawn twice, and we can just pick it up. It's not that easy for black to defend this pawn. Even a move like bishop to a6 doesn't do the job because we have two attackers on this b5 pawn. black would have to waste time playing a move like b5, and we don't actually have to change the structure. We can just kind of sit. Although I think I would be tempted at this point to play this move, just because I want this square for my knight, and this won't be possible in one move. Let's say if we play, let's say if we castle, white will have to be faced with the c5 move, and all of a sudden black is locking up the position. So I think that I would have taken here, played knight d5, maybe had the idea of playing c4, but immediately I'm castling. I like the idea of c3 more than c4 just because it takes away black's best hope at an outpost. And this knight is actually very strong. If black tries to trade off this knight, he's trading off his best piece. And I think that, after queen takes, white is close to strategically winning, because now h5 is a serious problem. And I just really don't like how this is turning out for black. This knight on c6 is on a pre, and already we're putting a lot of unpleasant pressure. C3 might even be more accurate here. But already strategically, we can see that by putting the bishop on e2, black had to waste another move. And this is why it's dangerous to move pawns for short-term plans. If you move a pawn for a short-term plan, you're creating weaknesses for a dynamic edge. But if that dynamic edge isn't enough to give you something in compensation, then you have a long-lasting weakness. So for example, when black played this move c6, it was kind of a short-term plan because he kind of wanted to stop d5 immediately, which he actually failed to do. But now he's got this long-term problem that white can take on c6 whenever he wants to release attention, and at the favorable moment to get the e5 outpost. In this case, by playing b5, if white had found bishop e2, this b5 pawn is permanently weak. Now you may ask, what do you do if black plays this move b4? But this is what we call hyperextension. Now, okay, white would have to move the knight back to b1, but if you look at how much time black has wasted with the position, this isn't actually that bad. If black plays c5 to try to solidify it, we can just play c3 and open up things again, or we can just continue castling, playing h5. White has all the moves in the world here, so having to retreat this knight back to b1 isn't that bad. a3 is also a considerable option, I think. If we play a3 and black plays a5, we can take, and there's no a takes b5, you'd have to play c takes b5. And things can get interesting. We can maybe play b3 to create a buffer. I wouldn't go around by playing a3, but I'm just saying that I think white, has a lot to play for. So I think bishop b2 would have been a lot stronger. But okay, bishop to b3, there is an idea in mind. Although we always have to remember, tricks are for kids, and we always have to consider that our opponents are seeing the best possible move. So you shouldn't play bishop b3 thinking that at some point black will take on d5. I think that positionally he just can't afford to do this, regardless of whatever tactics are threatening a mate on f7. Black played knight f4, perhaps deciding that he didn't want this pawn to get to h5 and then have tempo. So he played knight to f4, but I think that there is an actual problem with this move. Black actually took on f4. White actually took on f4 immediately, which I think is a mistake. But if white here just inserted this move g3, just asking himself what his forcing moves are, he has a huge strategic advantage because there is no check on g2. Maybe this is what was white's concern, because actually after king f1, this king is perfectly safe and this knight is perfectly trapped. So it's a win-win for white, I guess. So black would have to go back to g6, and now we can actually achieve what white wanted to achieve in the first place by playing h4, which is play h5. Now this knight goes back to e7. Now if we do a quick count of how many moves this knight would have had to have wasted to get into this line, it played knight to e7, knight g6, knight f4, knight g6, knight e7. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moves to be on the same square it could have been after one move. Now we can see how that's improved white's position. He has 3 pieces developed to black's 1, which can't go anywhere from e7, and he has he's given black some structural problems. There's no development. This king's not getting castled anytime soon, and here white shouldn't even consider castling kingside anymore, because I think at this point black needs to really castle kingside. Keep this rook on h1, play a move like king f1, king g2, play moves like bishop to e3, wait for the right moment to take on c6, and put a knight on d5. I think white's position very easily plays itself. Black has a lot of questions to answer and is probably already lost. So I think that this would have been the better way to play this. And again, when your opponent is cramped and they're looking for ways to activate their pieces, as the attacking player, you should seriously consider avoiding trades, so in that way you can retain your space advantage. Okay, bishop takes f4, e takes f4. We've created a structural weakness, but without a dark squared bishop, it's not exactly easy to get to, although we have ideas like queen d2 in the position. The thing that I don't like about this move is it does expose the e-pawn a little bit, and perhaps after moves like bishop g4, queen e7, and b4, black can hope to get a little bit of counterplay. And, me, preparing for the US Junior Open, which has a shorter time control, avoiding counterplay is always a good thing. And so here, white took on c6, and I think that this is already moving in the wrong direction, because now we're breaking open a position that was very favorable, and by releasing the tension, we're actually giving black an ability to go ahead and develop a piece, giving up, that kind of structural advantage. I know we have this outpost on d5, but we were going to have this anyways. Why give black the benefit of the doubt? Regardless of how much material wins, material doesn't win games. Checkmate wins games. So if you think about maybe the best ways to play this position, I think castling is already perfectly fine. The idea being we're going to get our rook on e1, and maybe we'll have an e5 break. Another thought will be maybe we should play a4 to weaken this queenside structure, ask him what he's going to do. And another thought would be if you want to go after this f4 pawn effectively, maybe an interesting idea would be to play knight e2, knight f4, and then knight e6 thanks to the support of the b3 bishop. Again, make the pieces work in unison and have a unified plan. Asking yourself the fundamentals will make sure your pieces flow together nicely. Alright, so white wins a pawn, but not without some counterplay for black. a6 is again a short-term plan. This doesn't exactly have benefits. But I'm already kind of curious here. Bishop to a6 and then trading on b5. Again, we're trading a developed piece for a piece that's not developed at all. And, okay, we'll have this permanent weakness on d6, and, white should still be able to win this game, but, if we're still playing, let's just make the best moves. I like bishop to a6. Rook to b8 would also be interesting, I think. The idea being that we'll make white play a move like c4, a4, and then play a6 or bishop a6, so I think that this would also be perfectly reasonable. Bishop e7, if we could castle, would be nice, but our problem now is because the position's opened up, this bishop on b3 takes away our ability to castle. That's probably the one benefit that white got from opening up this position entirely. But I think that this was an inevitable outcome anyways. It might have actually been interesting if we had allowed black to castle, but always have to worry about having this discovered opportunity with the king on g8. Alright. So we reach this position, a6. And this move actually does not work. I think white thought he had a tactic here, and I guess black believed him by playing king d7. But I can't see anything after playing king takes f7, and I checked it with Stockfish. Neither can the computer. The computer's best move is knight c3. Black is a 2-point edge. And as you can see, white has a lot more activity, but he has 2 pieces and a queen. Black's king is actually relatively safe now that he has time to play a move like bishop e6, taking away all of his light squared weaknesses, and he's doing perfectly fine. So at this point in the game, I think it's always important to understand what your long-term plans are. If you have a long-term plan that's a lot more effective than black's long-term plan, then play it, because a win is a win. If we can force ourselves to reach a winning position through taking more time, why not? We have to move this knight. If we play knight bd4, we allow black to trade, but he's trading his only developed piece. So this is already a considerable option. We can take the queen, and then play rook d1 and attack d6. Okay, this is perfectly playable. We can also play for queen d5, queen f7, because this was the point of bishop b3 in the first place, I'm assuming. So this would be an interesting option. Another option would be to play knight c3 and then knight d5. If we can blockade this pawn, we kind of highlight the issue of the Philidor, which is this f8 bishop, except black had already misplayed the opening and doesn't have g7, g6. So knight c3 is also fine. Knight a3 is also probably not incorrect. The idea being we're going to play knight to c4 and put pressure on d6. I think the one plan that black can really hope to play for is to play for d5 and trade the d-pawn for the e-pawn and hope for the best. But bishop f7, I think, fails to address any of the positional considerations in the position. Alright. King d7, and white is winning again because now this king has moved, this bishop can't develop, and this bishop is actually now a strong threat on f7. Knight d4 is an interesting option. I really want to be able to make this move e5 work, but I just can't really see a conceivable way, because f takes e5, there's no knight takes e5 because of knight takes e5 and everything's kind of threatened. We don't have enough pieces in the game and our king's still, in the center of the board, so opening up the center in a position where we're losing material, not exactly optimal. I like knight to c3 more than knight d4, because by trading we actually give him a free move to play bishop b7 and already control some light squares, so I think that this is already a pretty respectable option. So knight bd4, queen a5 check. Okay, there's the phrase Patzer play a check, Patzer see a check, Patzer play a check, but I think at this point, black needs whatever free tempi he can get. c3 is a perfectly fine way to handle this. Knight takes c3, knight takes c3, threatening bishop to e6 check, as well as controlling some critical light squares. Bishop to e6 check actually has some venom, because if the king tries to stay safe on d8 or e7, we have the immediate benefit of having knight c6. King to c7 will be hard to exploit with the knight or the bishop, but at that point we can already start thinking about bringing in an a-rook or a queen. Black centralizes his queen with queen to e5. White plays bishop to e6 check. King c7. And here I do not like this move, tactically. Why are we allowing ourselves to trade off a piece that never moved this game for probably what was our best piece up to this moment? So what were some other candidate moves? I like this, instead of bishop e6, I think bishop d5 is also a considerable option, forces black rook to go somewhere awkward. We can also go there after playing bishop e6, because now the king's moved. We can play bishop to e5, and if rook b8, we can consider a move like queen a4, because after rook takes b2, we have queen a5 check. And again, black is in some serious trouble. If the king goes back to d7, we have moves like bishop to e6. And our goal is simply to be able to insert a knight c6 check. So if king to e7 were played, and we look at the king's legal moves, if he plays to e7, we have knight to c6 check. If he plays here to e8, queen c7 looks pretty menacing, although we do need to be careful to make sure queen takes d4 doesn't work. So this is one thing to always consider. And one nice advantage here about having this bishop on d5. I look at this position, queen a4 check is also another possibility. We can also just castle. White is up so much in development, it almost doesn't matter that this rook is here on b2. So this would have been a very interesting line, I think. Here after bishop takes c8, you do risk that black can insert this move, queen takes e4. Just because we take, it's not exactly the most forcing moves. If you look at forcing moves, a lot of coaches say checks, captures, and threats. If you put them in tiers, checks usually rank above captures, which usually rank above threats. If you think about it, if I check you, you kind of have to make a move, right? That's the rule of chess. Block the check, take the check, move the check, right? If I'm taking your piece, 9 times out of 10 you're going to recapture because we're trading pieces. But if I take your piece, legally you're not obliged to take the piece. And then lastly, if I make a threat, sometimes that threat is so passive or so ineffective that it actually makes more sense to just continue with your plan. In this case, white has to immediately respond to this move, queen takes e4. And it's actually not so easy to do. If we play a move like queen to e2, I think black can consider this move, queen takes g2. But okay, simpler would be to play rook takes c8. And black's position is a nightmare, but believe it or not, we're actually materially even. Well, actually, we'll have to take the queen first, wouldn't we? Queen takes e2, king takes e2, and then rook takes c1. Okay, fair enough. But I think you get my point. Queen takes e4, I think, is a critical miss here from white. This move is actually completely possible. But fortunately enough for white, the game didn't continue that way, and actually, it was relatively smooth sailing throughout afterwards. Black tried to break through with d5, white solidified at f3, and this move, I think, was a little bit unnecessary. Generally, castling queenside in a position where the b and c files are open is very risky, and I think at this point in the game, white could have realized that his king would actually be safe on f2 if he can cover his, this b2 pawn. So, how about instead of being passive, we be active with a move like queen takes a6, queen c6 check, or rook b1 would simply solve that problem. The king is safer on like e2 and f2, believe it or not. This bishop has no way of getting to g3, so we should be fine. Queenside castling, rook b6, rook e1, white is just centralizing, threatening e takes d, a5, this plan is too slow. If I'm black right now, this is 1, 2, 3 moves for him to just play b3 and lock up the position anyways. What I want to look at is I want to look at forcing ways to try to get an initiative. So, my first concern is, okay, is this a threat? E takes d5, queen takes d5 because we're being attacked. Are there any critical discovered checks? There's no knight e6 and there's no knight b5. Okay, so that's not really an issue at the moment. All right, so bishop c5 or bishop c5 is probably the most accurate. We can play rook b8, force him to play b3, and then we'll play a5, a4. Only 2 moves, not 3, and we'll bust open the position. Black should still be losing, but it gives him the best hope. a5, takes, knight e6 check. Actually, I misevaluated that, didn't I? I forgot that there was this rook here anyway. So this is actually a problem. So black does need to address this issue, perhaps by just playing queen d6 now. But after it takes d5, he still has no way to stop on d6. So tactically, yeah, this game is just over. Knight e6, he has to give up his queen, and the game only lasts a couple more moves. Checkmate. So I thought that this game was particularly instructive because white got a huge developmental advantage, and especially at my level, I look at these things like, okay, it's almost decisive. I know it's not the same case for players who are still about 1,000, but you can still think about the position the same way. If you have a huge lead in development and you can continue to pose your opponent problems, don't go in for tactical simplifications that can make your life more complicated. In this game, I thought that white almost lost the game with bishop to f7 check, and even though simplifying, the center actually, moved white in the right direction, I thought black was on the brink of already making a mistake anyways. Why put yourself in a position where you risk losing the game when it means that you can actually just win on your opponent's hand? And this is definitely one strategy that I use when I play lower rated players is I wait for them to make the mistake. And 9 times out of 10, I don't really have to worry about creating any threats. So I think that this is definitely a valid strategy for anybody. 1,000, 2,000, Magnus Carlsen, anybody. So I thought that this was a particularly instructive game. White did a reasonable job exploiting black's weaknesses throughout, but I thought that there were some inaccuracies along the way that I thought were important to highlight. So this was the conclusion of Chess Chat 3 from the Chess Summit Chess channel. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. I'll be unable to post this weekend, unfortunately, because I'll be playing in the Carolinas Classic in Charlotte, but look out for a post on the other side on probably about Tuesday discussing my last tournament for the U.S. Junior Open and how I think I'm doing, going into that tournament in New Orleans. I'm really looking forward to this event this weekend, and I hope you guys are wishing me the best of luck. And that being said, have a good day.